think we'll get started then. Thanks everybody for coming. My name's Derek Slater, and I'm a policy manager on Google's public policy team. We're having this panel because we get asked often, what should developers be thinking about in terms of public policy and the legal environment around them? Rather than having us just talk to you about what Google thinks about, we wanted to introduce you to a few other people who are both working in the space of advocating on behalf of developers and startups, as well as helping developers and startups engage with government to improve government civic services. So that I'm going to turn it over to the leader of your panel, Mike McGeary, who is the co-founder and director of Engine Advocacy, a group that advocates on behalf of startups in Washington. Mike.
Thanks, Derek. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I will make you one promise as we start this whole thing. I know that I am keeping you from the party. So I will be prompt and we will make this worth your time. So with that, I'm Mike McGeary. I'm the co-founder, chief political strategist for an organization called Engine Advocacy. We're actually based here in San Francisco, and what we do, as Derek said, is connect the startup community in the United States to government at the federal, state, and local level, and work to build more efficient grassroots tools so that you, as a developer, an engineer, or as a founding entrepreneur of a company that's growing, can have more of a stake and a voice in a debate. I want to make this a little bit interactive since it's the end of the day, so if you'll indulge me. Tell me, how many people out there have ever taken some sort of political action other than voting? Everything from holding a sign to writing a letter to your congressman to going to a city council meeting. Okay, that's a surprising amount of you, and that's very good. For those of you here from the US, how many of you did that for SOPA? Okay, that's good. That's a lot of you. I'm excited. One of the reasons I asked that and why I think it's really good to gauge that is, for those that remember what it was like to go through the SOPA debate here in the US, it was really the beginning of, I think, the next stage in engaging people like you who design and build products every day in the political process. Because as your companies have grown and have taken root in places beyond San Francisco and beyond New York, and in cities all across the country, it's become more important for members of Congress, for people at the White House, for your mayor, for the governor, for people in the legislature, in the regulatory environment, whatever it is, to hear your perspective because you have a distinct and important economic impact on what happens to the wider economy. That's a lot of what we do with Engine. We're going to talk a little bit more about economic impacts and then about specific issues in areas that a lot of this panel that are all much more learned and smart than me, so I'm going to let them talk in a minute. What we're all working on and how you can get involved in that and help shape that debate. But from an overarching perspective, SOPA really changed a lot of things for us. It was the first time a lot of people all across the internet stood up and said, wait a minute, this has a material impact on me and my business. And that's why this is important. The internet, as I like to say a lot, and especially with my friends from Google, the internet is the greatest and most positive force for the democratization of ideas in the history of the world. And we need to protect a free and open internet, not least because we need to be able to exchange those ideas, but because so many of you are building products and applications and businesses and companies on that internet. A lot of them right here in the United States. And those have an impact on your community, on an economic level, on a social level, going even deeper than that into civic innovation, which we're going to hear about in a second. And I think that it's important to inject your voice in a debate when, if you have a two-person company and you're working out of that proverbial garage, I promise that not one of you would tell me your third hire was a government relations counsel. It's probably another developer. And that's what you're supposed to do. So we're going to try to make this easier. We're going to give you some tools to get more involved, more deeply, talk about some of the issues that are happening here in the US. For those of you who are here from overseas, we'll talk about global issues as well and want to hear from you. And some things like that. There are some groups that are forming all around the world to do this that we're friendly with, that we're working with. So we'd love to hear and talk more about that. Want to make it an interactive session. We're all going to do a little introduction. I'm going to ask some questions to the panel, and then we'll do a little Q&A. There are 2 microphones, and they've asked me to have you stand up and form an orderly queue so that we can get those questions on audio and video for perpetuity to be shared forever. But anyway. So thanks all for being here. That's my quick introduction. I want to kind of go down the panel and introduce you to who we've got here. First, to my left, we're really privileged to have Jen Pahlka with us, who leads Code for America. My favorite part of what she does is that it really allows you guys, developers, building companies, building organizations, with the 9 seconds of free time you have every week, you can jump in and help make your city smarter. Or you can take some time and really dive in and do that. She's going to talk more about that. But talking a little bit about civic innovation and what that can mean and how that can be an important step in building stronger communities. But Jen, tell us about Code for America and what you're working on.
Such a bad idea to put me first.
I know.
Do you want to do that? Okay.
Do you not want me to do that?
Well, I always like to pick it up after the.
Oh, okay.
But I can do that. Do you want me to do it?
Sure.
Okay. It is on. Okay. Thank you for that very sweet introduction. So I think the reason I didn't want to go first isn't that I'm shy, though I'm less shy every day these days, but that I think we do sort of pick up where others leave off in the sense that the first interface that you are offered as a citizen is a political interface, and the first thing you're asked to do is vote. You need to vote, and then after you sort of vote and then things don't necessarily turn out exactly the way you'd like them to, then you find other ways to advocate. And I think these guys are all going to talk about some very important ways that you need to advocate beyond voting. Where we come in is actually beyond that. So we're talking here about policy, and there are a lot of ways in which policies get written and passed, and they may be even the ones that you wanted, and then somehow it goes wrong yet again. Anyone hear Terry Gross? Actually, it wasn't Terry Gross, but it was Fresh Air last week, guest host talking about Dodd-Frank. Frank Dodd. So we passed this piece of legislation that is supposed to address some of the ills from the financial meltdown. And a lot of people worked really, really hard to get this thing passed. And I think there were a lot of things right about it, some things wrong about it. But basically, it was sort of doing the right thing. And then in the couple of years since it's been passed, it has now gone from the political realm into the bureaucratic realm to be implemented in government. Those people that we call bureaucrats, and we often use that word with a bit of contempt, and I don't think that is serving us well. They have the very difficult job of actually making that real. And in the years since that it was passed, most of the protections that were in that bill have been essentially unwound and, as I said, defanged, right? So there is this critical gap, I think, between the intentions of policies and the outcomes of policies. And that's one of the reason I'm starting with that is I'll give you a firm example from Code for America's work. We came into the city of Philadelphia last year, and we had a team working with the planners there on the 2035 plan. This is the strategic plan that will guide development within Philadelphia for several years to come. And they need input. They have a policy that says they're supposed to get input from a lot of different citizens about particular things like food deserts, whether rail lines should be extended. But the policy allows for people to come in and give that feedback. Well, they have to come in person at 6:30 on Thursday nights. So the people that come and give feedback to that plan are not the people that they need answers from. They're not the people who live in food deserts. They're not the people taking those rail lines. And so the Code for America fellows, these are people who took a year off. In fact, one of them was a Googler who took a year off and came to work with Code for America. They built a very simple text messaging platform. They put posters up around the city and in very particular places. So they said if they were in a food desert, it said, please tell us where you shop for groceries. Text your answer to this phone number. A lot of people don't, unfortunately, have internet access in their homes in Philadelphia, but they do, and they don't even have smartphones, but they do have phones that can do SMS. At the end of these rail lines, they said, would you take this rail line if it were extended? You'd text the answer in, and it would text you back another answer. Well, what if you had to switch to a different bus or something? So you could get all this feedback. That's making the policy that's making what you're doing actually meet the intentions of the policy. And I mean, there's a lot more to say about Code for America, and I think about different ways that we can affect policy. But I thought I'd just start with that as an example of how it's really important not just to think about politics and voting as your interface to government. We're really talking about getting under the hood. The bureaucracy is the operating system of our government. We need to get down there too.
That's great. Bureaucracy is an operating system. There's a concept. But no, it's absolutely true. And the work that you guys have done, and that's a great slice of life. It's been great. We're going to come back. I've got a couple of good questions there, but I want to introduce next Kevin Callahan, who is one of you in ways that the three of us are not. I often say that I should be barred from ever touching code on anything that we do publicly or privately, frankly, in websites that we build in my office. But Kevin is the technical co-founder of a business called Map My Fitness, and he's down in Austin, Texas. So why is he here on a policy panel? And Kevin, talk a little bit about your experience and why it matters to you as an entrepreneur owning a growing business, continuing to grow in Austin, so not in Silicon Valley, not in New York. Why it's important, do you think, for someone like you to be involved in policy?
Thank you, Mike. So my name is Kevin. I started my first website in 2005 because I was joked that I was too cheap to buy a GPS watch. And since then, we've grown to about 100 people, 50 of which are in Austin, Texas, about 30 in Denver, about 20 across the country. And I had always thought that I was a small business person without a real voice in terms of some of the policy that affects me. And so the reason I'm here is I met Mike about a year ago, and I learned about this great organization called Engine Advocacy. And there were three reasons that this organization really sort of compelled me, A, to be a member, but B, to sort of be up here on stage talking to you about sort of my experiences with Engine. First was need. As a technical co-founder, as someone who is trying to grow a business, we would eventually run into some hurdles. We kind of high-fived each other when we got our first lawsuit, and we were named next to Facebook and Google and MapQuest. Pretty soon, those high fives turned to tears as the lawsuits keep coming. But it was almost a rite of passage, right? You sort of get famous enough to get sued. And now it's getting involved in pushing through legislation like the American Invents Act, which radically changed the system. There's still a lot of work to be done with the SHIELD Act, which really puts the onus on the loser of a lawsuit paying your legal fees, which sort of fixed some of these problems. And it's through Engine that I really learned how to kind of interact and get my voice heard more. The second was confidence. I don't think prior to meeting Mike and hearing his stories about how he's worked with other startup founders, other technology companies my size, that I would be able to sit down at a table at dinner with Senator Corrin, who's one of our senators in Texas, with his legislative director, because they wanted to hear about my opinions about legislation, which was a really amazing experience. Mike was instrumental, or Engine Advocacy was instrumental in bringing Senator Moran to the table at South by, and sitting next to him and having him talk about his Startup Act 3.0, which really tries to address some of the broken things about our immigration system and our visa system. And then the third is education. I'm like all of you, we get inundated with news and how many different websites can you go to kind of really figure out the issues and figure out what matters. And Engine Advocacy really boils down the issues to what really matter to us as developers, us as business leaders, us as entrepreneurs. And so it's really sort of those three issues that I'm gladly able to come and sit up here in front of you guys and just tell you how much I love what Mike and Engine is doing.
He's not a plant, I promise you. Though, as I often say when we're on panels together, I'm just going to give you all the money in my pockets. So thanks, Kevin. You touched on a couple issues there that I think lead us into you, Jeremy, in that patent is something with American Invents and now SHIELD and some other things that I think a lot of people in this room have either run afoul of a patent troll, or if you haven't yet, as Kevin says, maybe you haven't graduated to the big boy level of getting sued yet. So hey, good luck. But we're trying to fix that too, and we're going to need a lot of developer voices on that. The other one is immigration, and there's a woman named Lisa Mitchell who works for the Kauffman Foundation, who is awesome, and also says if you asked an entrepreneur what their top 5 policy area issues are, and I'm relatively certain for those of you from the U.S. in this room, you probably would agree with this. If you asked for the top 5 answers on the board, the first 4 would be immigration, and the 5th one would probably be patent, but it's those first 4 is immigration. All the way down to my left is someone who's actually doing something about it. It is more than talk is action, and comes from a place where action means a lot more than words, and that's New York City. Jeremy Robbins is a policy advisor to Mayor Michael Bloomberg of New York and runs the Partnership for a New American Economy. I'm not going to read your whole bio, I'll let you do that, but he's also running something called the March for Innovation, which is a great way to get involved on what's happening with the immigration debate here in the United States and try to get more entrepreneurial people that are already here to be able to stay and start business and work for technology companies. So Jeremy, tell us a little bit about what you're doing in March and things like that.
Thanks. Thank you, Mike. I'd be delighted to. And so let me start where Mike started, which is by asking a couple questions. And I think the first one is, how many of you in this audience, by a show of hands, were born out of the United States? Keep your hands up. How many of you have at least one parent who was born outside of the United States? And now, how many of you work at a company where at least one key employee was born outside the United States? It's basically all of you. And there are two good reasons to ask that. First is because it makes it really, really obvious about the economic importance of immigration. Right? You are the cutting-edge developers in the most important innovation industry, or one of the most important innovation industries in our economy. And every single one of you depends on immigrants who are an immigrant yourself. And if you look at what those statistics are nationally, you get 40% of our Fortune 500 companies were founded by an immigrant or a child of an immigrant. If you look at innovation, what's coming out of our top universities, more than 3 out of every 4 patents from our top 10 universities have at least one immigrant inventor on the patent. I mean, the numbers are staggering when you think about innovation. But the second reason I asked you to put up your hands is because it means that almost all of you have had firsthand experience with our immigration system, which I assume also means you realize how broken it is. That if you want to come to America, you want to start a company, and you want to hire American workers, there's no visa for you. That if you are to come here on a temporary high-skilled visa, well, it turns out you're out of luck, because the year supply of high-skilled visas was exhausted in 5 days this year. You're going to have to wait till next April. Immigration reform is something that has been so fundamentally important for our economy for decades, but we haven't gotten. And the reality is that politics moves in moments, and this is a moment. That we have an immigration system that was started, by and large, the way it exists today in 1965, when we were watching black and white TVs, and it makes absolutely no sense in a global economy. But this is a moment for change. This is a moment where there is a comprehensive immigration bill right now in the Senate, a bill that has a very legitimate chance of passage, but has a very, very difficult road to becoming law. And I think there's a natural tendency for people to say, well, what can I do? That I'm just an individual. I don't know a senator. I don't go to DC. I don't understand how politics works. I think DC is broken. I don't think there's anything that my voice can do. But that couldn't be further than the truth. This bill is not going to pass unless people stand up. And people can't stand up because people care what you think. You can speak collectively. And especially when you talk about social media and new ways of communication, you have an outsized voice in this debate. And so that's why we started the March for Innovation, which is going to be the largest ever virtual march on DC. And we've been very proud to partner with Engine Advocacy since the very beginning. This march is going to kick off next Wednesday and Thursday. There's going to be a huge 2-day digital storm where we're going to get leaders from politics, from technology, from media, from entertainment, from sports, to jump across every social media platform, from Google Hangouts to Twitter town halls, from Reddit AMAs, creating a storm everywhere you're going to look, driving people to marchforinnovation.com, where they can sign up to with one click, use Twitter and Facebook to call on their senators for reform. And we're going to have a lot of star power to lead this, but the only way this works is if we build an army, is if people stand up individually, people tell their friends, people tweet about it, people get involved. And it's going to be a great success. It's going to be a great success in no small part because of Engine Advocacy and because of a lot of other groups that have encouraged people to get involved, that have encouraged people to know that you can actually make a difference very easily. And now that you all have nice Chromebooks, you can actually do it right now, or you can do it from your mobile device. You can go to marchforinnovation.com right now and sign up. And then there are tools to tell your friends, to queue up your call for support, to get involved, to tell your story, and to be active so that next week when we start this march, we can have a huge difference. And we will have a huge difference, but it all starts with signing up. And so what we need more of is we need more people to get engaged. We need more organizations like Engine Advocacy, which are absolutely on the cutting edge of grassroots organizing and of policy thinking. And so I thank you, Mike, and I thank you, Google, for having me here today and for this panel, because this is how change starts. So thank you.
This is really not a program-length commercial for Engine Advocacy, I promise. But thank you, Chairman. It's very nice. I want to stay with you for a minute because I want to ask. We're sitting here at I/O. These are the best developers and engineers in the world. So a virtual march. Okay. What can people who are much more technically savvy than you or I do to be particularly effective during this and moving beyond into the wider immigration fight through all of our platforms on this? And how do you think that could translate into sort of sustained movement to get people involved as well?
It's a great question, and I think a lot of it, I'm the wrong person to talk to because I think I should be learning more from you in the sense that if you look at why SOPA PIPA was such a big success, and I know I saw a lot of hands in this audience that played a big role in it. It was a success because people got creative, people got active, and it wasn't just Wikipedia shutting down. I think too often one of the problems of SOPA PIPA is that the lesson that seems to be learned, at least in the media, is that Wikipedia shut down for a day and therefore the bill stopped. That's not what happened. What happened is that people like Mike McGeary and people like you in the audience went crazy. You looked at what your talents were and whether it was creating a Tumblr storm or getting viral videos or whatever you were doing, it was figuring out ways to make it easier for people to engage, to tell this story in different ways, and to get people involved. And I think that when we have the smartest developers in the world, many of them sitting in this room, it's about what can you do with your own initiative? How can you, maybe it's something as simple as a Vine video or animated GIF. Maybe it's building a web tool. Maybe it's mocking up a website or taking the widget that you can download at marchforinnovation.com and iterating on that. That there are a lot of ways that we need smart people coming up with creative and smart solutions, and I think that this is where it starts, is rooms like this.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we really work to do is create a platform where creative people can go and do exactly that, because you and I and the rest of us, we're not the smart ones all the time. We're trying to create the platform and get more people involved to do exactly that. I want to turn to Kevin for a minute. I want you to talk a little bit more about your experience in having dinner with John Cornyn's legislative director as a business person, who's a constituent as well. And I want to use that as a frame to talk about some of the issues that you see coming down the horizon that are going to be specific to where you see it, where you see as a business going beyond immigration and things like that. Like what would they have been most interested in, and what take us inside that conversation a little bit. And was it scary going in and scary coming out, or was it productive?
No, so it was tremendously scary going in. Here was this gentleman that flew in from DC, who spent the day touring Dell and AMD and all these large Fortune 50 companies or Fortune 500 companies here in Austin. But then he just wanted to unwind with a beer, talking to someone who just sort of is trying to grow a company and to understand sort of what issues were important to me. And questions he was asking was a Startup Act. How does that really sort of impact kind of my role, my job? And for me, what it is I live in Austin. I have a growing company. We doubled our size over the past year. I can't hire engineers. If any of you want to move to Austin, Texas, we're actually hiring Python engineers.
The barbecue is really good.
Yeah, the barbecue is really good.
Hot in the summer.
But yeah, so the Immigration Act speaks volume to me as a person. I actually grew up, I lived in 12 different countries growing up. My father was State Department. I have friends all over the world that never had the opportunity to come and work here because of our system. So the Jobs Act or Startup Act was really important to me. Another really important sort of thing with me is another topic we talked about was the Electronic Communication Privacy Act. It's this 25-year-old act that was put in place to sort of deal with electronic information. And what that basically means now is the government can take your emails if they say, well, we've already assumed you've read them, so then we can use them and use them against you without any sort of legal recourse. And so it's an outdated system, but what that does to me as a small business owner who deals a lot with location data, who deals a lot with health data, not health data, but about you because of the health and fitness apps we build. But that really sort of puts a burden on us in terms of being able to comply should that ever happen to us. And so the idea is, well, let me start talking about it now. Let me have the platform to talk to a senator's legislative aide so that if he ever gets in a position to make a stance one way or another, I know my voice has sort of been added to that conversation.
And ECPA, Electronic Communications Privacy Act, in a lot of ways, we talked after SOPA. The next one was CISPA. and that was about cybersecurity. In a lot of ways, ECPA actually has even more, that, as it's written now, before it's being amended, is more detrimental consequences from a Fourth Amendment standpoint in the United States in terms of search and seizure of online and private materials. And so it's good to see that they're starting to get wind of that and starting to ask questions as well. And hopefully, it's more than it's been cast in some circles, which is, well, if we change this, you'll be able to share what you watch on Netflix on Facebook, because that also stops you from doing that, oddly enough. But there are some really interesting Fourth Amendment implications there, so it's good to hear they're working on that. Okay, Jen, I know you didn't want me to come to you first, so I definitely want to come back to you now and talk more about the culture shift you're seeing in cities around the country and some of the things that you've been able to do there, first of all. But in a two-part question, because you guys made a really brilliant hire recently in hiring Catherine Bracey to do Code for All.
Yes.
She is, if you guys don't follow @cbracey on Twitter, make sure you're doing that. I'll get her a bunch of followers right there. She's running Code for All and helping with international strategy. I know we've got a lot of international people in the room, so if you could touch on that, but then also just generally like where you've seen your own advocacy, take you and overall and broadly, and thinking about what Code for America can do from that perspective.
Okay. So Catherine, if you're watching, we'll count that as an announcement of Code for All.
Sorry.
That's cool. She was hoping someone would
Okay.
agree. She's brilliant. So, I mean, I think you asked a couple questions in there. One is about the culture, and I think that whatever question you asked, it gives me an opportunity to make a good point, which is that Code for America is about, we create apps, we work with governments, local governments on building these apps, but the real outcome is that we're using lean startup techniques, we're using user-centered design, we're walking them through a process that's vastly different from how technology is usually bought or built within government, and the process that they go through with us is actually more important than the outcome. The outcomes have been successful, and so it's been fun to be able to talk about those, but what we talk about less often, because it's sort of the follow-up question, is what happens when somebody who is a technology person in government goes through this process and sees that it is possible to create an app in 3 months, that if it had gone through their procurement process would have taken, these are not random numbers, this is really from one particular example, and we have many like them, a 3-month app that we did that they said would have taken at least 2 years and cost at least $2 million. So that creates the political will for change. And the real outcome here is the culture virus effect of having someone go, oh my God, we can do this differently. I'm going to go talk to a whole bunch of people, other people around city government, and get them excited about a different way of doing things. And to bring it back a little bit, though, I think to the sort of advocacy piece, I'm talking about sort of the flip side of what you guys are talking about here, which is that, the people in, especially federal government, they think they know technology. They talk to a lot of companies that do technology, and there's increasingly some great people, great companies that are serving the government. But there is an entrenched group of companies there, and they're often not the kinds of companies that you people are starting. And so they don't know these issues, and they're not getting the benefit of the innovative approaches that we see in the startup community. And so one of the I mean, if the open question here is, what is it? How can your startup influence policy? This is the biggest ask we can make. And I'm not asking for your year of your time as a fellow, though we would love that too. And we are recruiting for fellows for 2014. And it's an amazing, amazing experience. But the biggest ask, really, because that's a one-year time-limited thing, is start a company that serves government. There are an enormous number of opportunities to do that. Think about the way we regulate right now, and contrast it with how Matt Cutts regulates spam and search quality results. We take like 3 years to change the law, when by the time we change the regulation, it's completely outdated. We need algorithmic regulation. There are companies that should be built around that. That's one of, I don't want to go on because this could take all day, but there's a million great companies that need to be built that can serve government. And I know most of you think about like, no way in hell, right? Like, I'm not going to go through that 2-year procurement process. I'm not going to, I don't want to, I want to make great product. I don't want to work on paperwork. But the thing you need to understand is that that's changing. It may be changing slowly, we may be in the beginning of it. But part of this culture change is the will to do procurement differently, to open the government contracting system up to a whole new set of vendors. There's a great project that was just released called Procurio, or I think it was originally called RFPEZ, which allows your average 30-person web shop to bid on a federal website contract. Clay Johnson released this video recently where he talked about the fact that the president just announced an initiative to map the human brain, and it's going to cost $100 million. We routinely spend something like $150, in this case $188 million on one government website. Do you think you guys could do a decent government website for less than $188 million? I think you probably could. That's our money, that's our taxpayer money. And the benefit of it is if you get in there and you're working in government, then our leaders in government actually have an understanding of the issues that you're dealing with too. So it all comes together. And this was a very long ad, which I will wrap up, for our Code for America Accelerator, which is accepting applications at the through the end of this month. But there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. That's one important one.
Well, and the most interesting thing for me with what Clay did with RFPEZ, which is now Procurio, is that was a government program. He was a Presidential Innovation Fellow. He worked with Todd Park, the U.S. Chief Technology Officer. It was in the White House. It was, a very structured program that's now been spun out and has become its own private entity, and is, that's starting to now bleed out and help people. I've said this before, I think, but government's really good at spending $100 million or $1 billion of taxpayer money. They're not really good at spending 25 grand. And that's where, especially in the kind of products that you guys are all building, that's where a lot of the meat can really happen, where the rubber can meet the road. So.
And by the way, we're two of the Code for America teams this year, in addition to the other work they're doing with their city partners, are implementing Procurio. So we tie between what happens at the local level and what happens at the federal level. That's
great. That's encouraging to hear. We've got a few minutes left, so if there are questions, I'm going to encourage you to run up to the. Oh, there are questions. This is fantastic. So let's do that, and then we'll take a couple questions and have some closing remarks. But I'll start at the front microphone with the gentleman in the green shirt.
So I have to. Is this on? So I have to piggyback on that last conversation. So from the opposite side of the spectrum, so I'm a technology professional within the government, having the problem of going through the acquisition challenges of both the FAR and the DFARs and other types of legislation. It's very, very difficult, even if you work with the open source advocates across the community to push out capabilities so that you can get people to work on it. You can't get the money out to be able to take multi-million-dollar programs and actually make them efficient with smaller teams across the U.S. or otherwise. Do you know what's going on? So I haven't heard of that particular initiative. Are there other things to be looking into, that there's actually top cover of actually changing the implementation of the DFARs and so forth?
Federal acquisition regulation, is that FAR?
So that's the FAR, and then there's other nuanced iterations of that.
So this, to me, again, this is the you guys can answer too. This is the operating code, right? That is sort of bloated, right? That we need to get at, and we're not there yet. I think where this movement is proving that it can work in a couple of limited cases. So Procurio really was built just for one use case, just to start, which was a sort of basic website, right? It's got content, it has a little bit of interactivity, it's probably pulling some data from some database, and anybody here could probably do this. What I would suggest, so it starts to create that conversation, which leads to, okay, these are laws and regulations that need to be changed. But I would recommend for you, in the situation that you're at, to look at the Presidential Innovation Fellows Program. That's the way that the Todd Park, this federal CTO, and Steve Van Rokel, the CIO, are trying to pull these sort of overcomplicated processes together and say, we're going to create a little space here for innovation. We're going to take this process and we're going to say, we can do something with this in 6 months. We're going to have something that works at the end of 6 months, whether it kills us or even if it kills us. And then from there, you kind of build back into, okay, how does this now become a sustainable thing that works differently from the bloated process that went before? Does that help?
Yeah, again, it's one of those things where there's been a lot of talk about this for a number of years across the actual government circles, whether it be through different CIO shops or otherwise, and curious how it's progressing from the actual community side outside of that.
There is no one effort, I'll try to be brief, there is no one effort that can fix everything. I think that, to your point before about a platform that has emergent outcomes, the best thing that we know how to do, and I wish we knew how to fix this, is to tell the stories that create the political will for change and create the environment and opportunity for other people to stand up and say, this needs to change, we're going to do this too.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit of an outsider in terms of sort of government process and regulations, but I know with Obama's executive order last week mandating that all government data is accessible, machine readable, et cetera, depending on what your need, Code for America actually has brigades in cities. And so if it's something that's really important to you and that you think can make a big difference, contact the local brigade and see when their next hackathon is, because potentially they could prototype something out if whatever you're doing has that type of data available out in the wild.
Okay.
I want to go to the back microphone, and we just do have a few minutes, so we'll keep it going. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Mike, and I work in political data in DC, so I might be one of the bad people here. But one of the common threads that you all were talking about was it seems that there's a big failure of being able to connect citizens to the people who can make something actually happen, whether or not it was the bureaucrats or the people crafting legislation or the people who will end up voting on legislation in the end, trying to persuade them. My question is, how do we solve that?
I want to just briefly say, and I guess somehow even growing up a Red Sox fan, I turned into an eternal optimist. But I would say that more than this being a moment of failure, it's a moment of opportunity. That with the proliferation of tools on the internet and platforms that have been built, there are numerous different ways for you now to take action to make that system better, whether it's being a presidential innovation fellow at that level, or working with your Code for America brigade, or taking action on a political issue, or working with your local police department to help them understand the data that they have that they don't even know they have, and how it can be cross-referenced with public health data to help make your city stronger. There are ways to do all of this on the ones and zeros level, and to build applications off that in ways they haven't before. Procurio is a great way to think about it, and that now you can build that, and a city can purchase it and use it. Imagine that. They just haven't been able to do that before. So less a moment of failure, more a moment of opportunity. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts there.
Quick. On a local level, you can actually make more of an impact than you think you can, because local level, you don't necessarily have to solve a federal issue if something is local for you. So just go to a city council meeting and just start seeing who's talking about what, and just get involved.
We use the word conversation a lot, and I think it's important. We're talking in some cases about getting our elected leaders to listen to us and our bureaucrats to listen to us. And the other side of it is, are we listening to the data? Are we listening? Are we playing that back? And I think your example of police data is a perfect one. But there's a bunch others. That data is there. When your local IT guy in your town actually puts that data out there, it is your job to go listen to that data. They are opening a conversation with you. Show up. Yeah. Talk, look at it, do something with it. We talk about at Code for America that we're creating interfaces to government that are simple, beautiful, and easy to use. That actually is your role to create those interfaces, because the average person goes and looks at that data and goes, WTF, I don't know what this stuff is. But that is the start of a conversation, and we have to meet those people halfway.
I think we've got time for one more, and then we'll all be here for a couple of minutes afterwards. You can grab us individually, but...
Hi, I'm from Latin America. I'm from Colombia, actually. And, our governments also have copied stupid and crazy regulations like SOPA and PIPA. It's everywhere in Latin America, Colombia, Venezuela, Mexico, Chile. If they copy and just they want to copy, they are not conscious about what they are doing. Will you suggest to create, like a union for Latin American countries of people like you increasing the consciousness of entrepreneurs, business professionals, and general users on internet to affront this kind of movements from our governments that just want to facilitate the surveillance and censorship over the internet in Latin America?
There are groups like that that are starting all over the world every day. We work particularly with groups like Coalition for a Digital Economy in the UK. We just did something with France Digitale in Western Europe this week as well. And we work with groups in Europe, Latin America, all around the world that are starting to get together. They're a little bit nascent stage. And of course, with the individual political situations in a lot of these countries, that changes the focus and the ability to engage in a lot of ways. But yeah, I would encourage you to do exactly that. Find the startup founders that understand that there is a direct impact and that they have that impact on the economic forces at play in government, on communities themselves, and on government at the highest level, with being able to do things like make bureaucracies more efficient and work for the people more. And if you get those people together and you're able to galvanize them in a way that allows them to think about these issues and then take action, that you really can have an impact no matter where you are. Again, that's a little bit of the optimist in me, but there are groups like that are forming every day, and if there's not one in Colombia yet, I think you ought to start it.
Thank you.
So, two quick things. We got to wrap it up there. They're going to kick us out. Thank you all for being here. We'll stick around and answer questions individually, and I am doing office hours tomorrow if you really want to talk to me for any reason. I'm at Google Developers something. Google Developers Group at 11 o'clock, and I will answer any random questions you have, including about, I don't know, Red Sox history and optimism. But thank you all for being here. I hope this was informative, and enjoy the rest of I.O.